aren't these scraps pretty? We're going to do an experiment here, and we are going to see whether or not I can use these to make these for a plant stand or a riser, because by using these, I can have rounded corners. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to countersink holes for screws, because screws work better in particle board than nails do. So we're just going to go ahead and we are going to countersink some holes in all of these pieces. And I am just coming in just slightly past where this curve breaks over, and just evenly spacing these holes. Okay, I've got the first two pieces put together. You can see how the rounded edge meets up with a square edge. So what I'm doing is I am just placing the edges together like this. Now you're going to have a little bit of an overlap here on this side, so that we make sure that we get our screws going into the center of this piece here. And I'm just going to make sure that I've got everything lined up. And I'm going to start one at the top and one at the bottom, making sure everything's lined up. If you've got clamps and you want to use clamps, you might try that. I actually started out with clamps, but my clamps were a little too heavy to stay in position. So I am just eyeballing it and holding it with my hands. Now that we've got the box together, we are going to work at getting it trimmed out. So if you look at the sides, there are sections where we had to have it lap over on the sides. I don't really like seeing this raw edge out. So what I did was I went out and looked through my scraps again, and I found one piece of what's called screen door trim. And it is a piece that normally it's triangular on the back side of it, so it fits back in here. But when I tried putting it in here, it kind of stuck out. So what I did was I took it to my table saw and I ripped a little section of that side off. So now I have this piece that fits right in there pretty close to perfectly. So I am going to stain these pieces, and then I have cut a piece of ply. This is actually an inch thick, and this is going to fit on top as the top, and the top will then be trimmed out on all sides so that it looks a little more finished. So right now, and I am using it's a Rust-Oleum stain and polyurethane. The color is Early American, and the reason I'm using it is because I have it on hand. Because again, this project is supposed to not cost me anything. I'm going to go ahead and put gloves on, which I'm so proud of myself for remembering today, because normally I don't remember to put gloves on. I'm usually in such a state to get started that I forget that I should be protecting my hands. And I generally just use a rag and dip it in a little bit of stain. And then just cover my pieces. And this is supposed to only need one coat. I'm going to put a little more stain on that because I'd like it to be a little darker. You want to make sure you're doing this evenly. And then I take the clean part of my rag and I give it a little bit of a wipe off. Not a lot, because I do want to keep some of the color. And then we'll move on to the other pieces. And I'll go ahead and finish the other two pieces. Let's try it out on this, though. I'm curious, because this ply has so much red in it. I'm not real sure how this is going to color it, so I'm just kind of curious about that. I think that's going to be pretty. I kind of like the idea of having just a touch of wood tone on that piece, but I think that's going to be really pretty. And I do have a tendency, I'm going to see if I can darken these up a little bit. I have a tendency to like a two-tone every once in a while, where you have a little bit of it is wood tone, and then maybe another part is painted. Yeah, I'm going to like this being done a little darker. I think it's going to come closer to blending with the top now. I'm going to leave this stain on these two pieces for a little bit, let them darken up, because I don't want them to be too far off. I mean, I don't mind when you have pieces that have two different colors of wood tone on them, but I kind of feel like in this particular case, I just think these are going to look better. If they're a little darker, I think they'll blend a little bit better. I probably, if I was going to go out and buy a stain to match, I probably would have gotten a stain that had a little more red into it, but I think this is going to be fine. And I don't want to spend any money to get anything, but I need a plant stand. So there again, we're going to use what we've got. And there's nothing that pleases my little soul more than being able to make something pretty for my home, something useful for my home, and not have to spend much money on it, or no money. If I can do something for free, that just makes my day. All right, to put the small trim pieces on, I am going to take this area where I cut that off, so I have a nice straight solid piece to go right here in the corner. It seems to be just about the perfect size to offset. Let me turn it so you can see it. To offset where this corner wraps around. And I am using a size 23 brad. And while I don't typically use nails in, it's kind of hard to reach in here, in pressed wood, I am in this case because there's not going to be any stress on these, and they really don't have to hold anything in place. Now, this trim is just too small to be putting screws in. It would split out, and back in this corner where I'm putting it, screws might even split out this pressed wood. But I'm just going and putting these in, and that finishes off that raw edge there, and just makes it look a little more thought out and a little more finished. Now I do have one corner here where it doesn't fit perfectly, but it's just how it is because we're using scraps. We're using scraps, and not everything is going to fit together perfectly because this is not exactly a traditional assembly. Normally you wouldn't put one end in and one end out. So things aren't going to fit exactly perfectly, but it's going to be fine because you're not really going to notice that it's not a perfect square. And this top actually is not a perfect square either. It is a little longer one direction going this way than it is this way. It's like a 1/4 inch difference. But I'm using what I have, and this piece will work. You know, we can make it work. It's just that it's not going to be in an exact proportion. This is the size I had. I couldn't go any wider. So now, in order to finish this off around the edges, because I don't want all the raw edge from the plywood showing, I have some stop. This you typically use as door stop, but I use it for everything. It's just going to serve as a trim piece this time. And what I did was I cut a mitered end on each side. These are 45 degrees, but they are an outside corner because you want, when you're putting two pieces together, you want those corners to come together and meet and basically look almost as though they are one piece. So what I'm doing is this short end should come right to the corner of the board. So I'm going to nail this in, make sure that it is even on top with the ply. And there again, a lot of my scraps are scraps, if they have any size to them, they tend to be scraps because they might have had a twist or a little bow, or there was something a little imperfect about them. Is why I wound up with a piece that's the size some of these pieces are. But there again, this is more of just a little bit of a decor piece. It's not like it's a structural part of my house. And it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. Just like I said the other day when I did a video, perfection can be very expensive. And when you're just doing a little piece for yourself, if you've got a spot on it you don't like, turn it to the wall. It's not going to kill anybody. Now there again, if you were doing something as, depending on who you were giving it to, if you were doing something as a gift or something as an item you wanted to sell someone, you might want it to be a little bit more perfect. But if you're planning on doing something like that, do your prototypes out of imperfect scraps. Once you do a prototype out of imperfect scraps, using good materials makes the project super easy to do. So, and I'll turn this around and you'll be able to see that these corners, they may not be absolutely perfect because, well, let me put a nail maybe in there. Might be able to make it look a little bit better, but the corners may not be absolutely perfect, but that ain't too darn bad for using scrap lumber. I got one piece left, and if I've done my job correctly, it will fit in there just perfectly. And it comes pretty darn close, given the fact that this is all scrap, and I'm not really what I would consider a pro. I am just a woman that likes to save money and does all of her own stuff. And I do, well, that popped loose. I do enjoy doing this kind of stuff. I love making things. But I got started doing this kind of stuff when I was younger, and I wanted pretty things for my home, and I couldn't afford them because I started out as a young married woman at the age of 19, and it was at a time when that's just what you did when you got out of school. Not that many women, necessarily young women, necessarily looked at going to school and getting a college degree. Some of them did, but a lot of them, you got out of school and you were expected to get a job or get married or both. And I did the or both. So that is the top to my box. Now, it's like I said, it's not perfect. If you watch woodworkers on YouTube, I'm sure they could find all kinds of problems with this. But I'm just common, ordinary old woman that's almost 65 years old that just, I'll put another nail in here to hold this a little better, that just does stuff. I never claimed to be able to do perfect work. I just claim to be able to make the things I need to make and make do with what I have. And it's fun. I love, absolutely love, to take things that most people throw away and turn them into something pretty. Now, we could either stop right here and attach this top, just countersink some screws and attach this top to the cube and leave it as is, as a plant stand. Or we can leave this free like it is now so that it just sits on there nice and tight, got a nice good solid fit. Leave this open, and if we put a bottom on, we not only have a plant stand, but we have a storage cube. Ultimately, I did decide to put a bottom on mine, and I have gone ahead and attached the bottom just to kind of save some time for us here. But what I did was I cut a piece of ply that was about 1/2 inch larger than the base of this cube. And then I went ahead and repeated the trim that I put on the top. Now, I went ahead and, because this trim is already a prime trim, the base part is going to be white. So I went ahead and painted the bottom piece on this cube. And then I am going to go ahead and attach this trim, but it's actually being attached kind of in an opposite way. It's the flat edge is going on the bottom, just like it went on the top when we did that. So both pieces that kind of graduate down one will graduate down from the top, one will graduate up from the bottom. So I am just going to go ahead and nail these pieces, which also are cut just like the top, with a 45 degree on both ends, so that you have an outside corner. Okay, I think all we've got left to do now is put a couple coats of white paint on our base trim. And we have a cube that works not only for storage, but as a plant stand, or in the case of somebody who has a small residence, if you need extra seating, you could pull this out for extra seating. If you make one of these tall enough, you could use them for side tables. Once you learn how to make cubes, you can have a lot of versatility in your projects. So I'll be back in a little bit and show you the completed piece. Okay, here we are with the finished piece. And if you've been paying attention as I've been showing you how to do this, you'll notice that every side has a different design on the side. So each side is going to be uniquely different. You don't have to have matching pieces to do this. So let me take this. Well, I better leave it there for right now. I have a board underneath that allowed me to paint the bottom, but the paint's still a little damp down there. So what I did was I painted the base piece. I filled any of the holes. Now, I basically just filled the holes with some caulk and a little bit of joint compound, only because I didn't have wooden pegs. If I had had some wooden pegs, I would have filled every hole with a wooden peg so that you would have the wood carried down, and it would have been more of a decorative element to it, but I didn't have any, so I wanted to do this project without purchasing any supplies. So I just filled the holes, and they show, but they don't show a lot. It doesn't bother me too much. So I've painted the bottom white, I've painted the top white. My paint and finish is still a little damp. And the top I stained, but then I put a couple coats of a clear finish on it because I really wanted that top to kind of stand out, and I wanted to make sure that it was as waterproof as I could make it, because I'm going to use this as a plant stand. And like I said, if you don't want to go to all the trouble of putting a bottom on with bottom trim and so on like that, you can just make a cube shape, put a top on it, and you don't even have to get this fancy with these trim pieces on top. If you have just a beautiful piece of hardwood, just lumber that is big enough that you could cut a piece and just countersink it and screw the top down, you could do something just as simple as that. I just decided I live in a small house. It never hurts to have a little extra storage. So that's why I went ahead and made mine as a storage cube as well. And I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, considering every single piece that I used to do this cube would have come out of the typical trash pile for anybody doing home improvements or building projects. Some of these pieces were barely 12 inches long. And you can see how I've kind of modified a little bit to use what I had instead of going out and maybe buying a larger piece for the top. So you can do the same thing with what you have. And this is even a project, while I don't promote that people go out and buy materials to copy what somebody else has made, because that gets expensive. When I'm pulling it out of the trash pile, I can make something for little of nothing. If you go out and buy the exact things I have, you're going to have more money in it. But as it turns out, this project would not have been expensive to make, even if you went out and bought the supplies to make it. All of the marble look shelving that I purchased from Menards came in 36-inch pieces by 12-inch pieces. It only cost $1.46 per shelving piece. So depending on what size of cube you wanted to make, you could probably buy for $3 the materials to make the sides. Even if you went and got the craft ply at Menards, you wouldn't have a lot of money in that. Now, my pieces are about 1 inch thick. You could make this cube certainly out of ply that was 1/2 inch thick and save money that way. I just used what I had. And even these little trim pieces, one piece of this screen trim would be affordable. So even if you wanted to go out and buy the supplies and copy this the way I've made it, it would be affordable for most people. But again, if you are on a tight budget, if you have reduced your spending as much as you possibly can, either because you have to or because you're putting money back for retirement, money back to purchase a home, whatever your reasons, take what you have in your scrap pile, a friend or family member scrap pile. If people have done home improvements or projects and you see that they're going to throw stuff away, ask them if you can have it. Ask them if they would mind if you took their cast-offs. Most people would be happy to have somebody just haul it away for them. So be creative. Use what you have. Make it work. And I will show you how I'm going to style it in just a bit.